It is just a huge, 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 unbelievable honor to have one of my earliest role models and mentors, Paul Homoly.
Howard, hey.
Come over to my house.
Yes.
Here's the story on this guy. I graduated in '87. It wouldn't be too long after that. So I got to tell you the long story. This is so funny. So I knew all the happy, successful, quality dentists. I figured out within a year or two, they all had this FAGD,
right,
MAG behind the nose. So I met a couple of them, and they said, you know what? You sign up for the AGD, you'll be hanging out with the people going for it.
Sure.
And you're a summary, you're 5 best friends. So I signed up for the FAGD and hated it because I eventually got my MAG, but I hated it because I wanted to just take all my courses in fillings and crown and bridges.
Right.
But to get my FAGD, I had to go study ortho and implants, and I'm like, but I don't want to do implants.
Yeah, I had to do the same thing. The lowest score I got on my AGD, fellowship AGD, was practice management. That was my lowest score. I thought, I'm in trouble now.
And I thought, I got to take all these hours and implants. So I looked around, and everybody was saying Carl Mish, Carl Mish, Carl Mish. And I looked at Carl Mish, and it was 7 3-day weekends in Pittsburgh.
Sure.
And the only thing I liked about it was I could finish all my requirements.
All in one spot.
So all I had to do is waste 7 weekends in a row and go down there. So I go down there, and Carl, nobody has ever spoke more highly of you or anybody I know than Carl Mish did of you. And the reason Paul was amazing is not only is he amazing dentist and amazing implantologist, but what Carl just couldn't believe, and everybody would be taking notes of this guy. You were the first guy that could sell full mouth rehabs.
Right.
Of all the plate in North Carolina, which at that time wasn't really.
It still isn't.
It wasn't really Key Biscayne, Florida, or Beverly Hills.
Right.
And you would show your cases, and Carl would talk about your cases, and everybody would just sit there and say, where are you getting these cases?
Yeah, I get that all the time.
And you were getting them from just regular Joe Blow Americans. And I listened to you speech. I think it was 87. I think it was probably about 1990. Right. I eventually got my FAGD, MAGD, my fellowship in the mission. But it's funny because I got my diploma in the International Congress of Oral Implantology before they had 3D X-rays.
Okay.
I don't know if that is still good.
The old 2D X-ray creates some anxiety when you're placing implants.
Oh my God! We used to think we had so much to work with on that pano, and then you'd flap it back and thought.
Well, I remember you sitting there when I was teaching at the Mish Institute. Funny, Carl and I were buddies very early on. Carl had maybe a 2 or 3 year head start on me in implant dentistry. And Carl and I would end up at the same programs together, speaking in the same programs. And I didn't really know him. We were kind of young bucks. He'd speak and I'd speak, and we kind of knew each other, but there was that competitive edge. And so one time we were in Birmingham, Alabama. This was at the Alabama Implant Study Club. This was about maybe the 3rd or 4th time I spoke there. And they had those booths where they would sell the cassette tapes from the speaker. So I'm kind of walking through the exhibit halls, and who's standing over there by the booth looking at the tapes is Carl Mish. So I walked up to him, and he looks at me, he says, I'm just making sure that I'm selling more tapes than you are. We had a good laugh. We went out to dinner. We had a couple of glasses of wine. And what was interesting is that back then Carl looked at me, he said, you know what? He said, we need to be allies. We need to be advocates in the marketplace. We're in a profession that's emerging. It's disruptive. There's a lot of people that are not going to like what we're doing, and we need to support each other. And that started the friendship right there. And then for the next probably, 10 years, I taught at the Mish Implant Institute. Here's the story behind it. This is how it started. Carl was teaching these one-off courses. He flew me up to Michigan. I'm working with him. Back then, I was teaching prosthetics and surgery, and we're sitting in Carl's kitchen. I'm sitting on the kitchen counter, having a glass of wine. He says, I'm thinking about starting an institute. What should we call it? I said, Carl, why don't you call it the Mission? No, I can't name it after me. It'd be too egotistical. I said, no, Carl, you got to call it the Mish Institute. So Carl's brother, Craig is down in Florida right now. Craig is amazing. A few other faculty members, Jay Crawford, a few other guys, me, were really the core faculty there. Carl would put these courses on in his office, and I'm telling you, Howard, people would come from literally all over the world. And his office was in Dearborn, Michigan, And it was a big office, but it wasn't a Peter Dawson kind of palace. It was just a regular dental office with a bunch of handpieces and a bunch of chairs. And these people would come in, and Carl would bring these patients in, and we're banging in implants, and people are taking notes and raising their hands. It was like the Wild West. It was incredible. I did that for 10 years with Carl. And what was interesting about Carl, I remember sitting down talking with him one time. And if you knew Carl, Carl had this photographic memory about modulus of elasticity and what makes this happen and all this stuff. He was a genius. He had brains in places where I didn't even have places. And we got half drunk one night. All the great conversations occur after a couple glasses of wine. I said, Carl, how do you study? How do you learn all this stuff? How do you keep it here? He said, I don't know. I just study. I said, no. Let's break it down. Give me a process. Let's say you got an article on bone grafting. How would you do it? He says, well, I would read, and I would stop if there was something that I didn't fully understand. I said, okay. He said, but I'd only read in short increments. I'd only read for about 10 minutes at a time. Then I would stop and walk around the room, take a drink. Come back and read the article. I said, okay. I said, now when you're done with the article, how would you file it? Would you file it by topic or by author? How do you store it? And he looked at me and he said, well, Paul, if you studied the article, why would you need to save it? And that's when I saw Carl's train pull away from mine. He had this intellect. I heard him do presentations on bone grafting. See, back then the whole thing was Gore-Tex, remember that?
Yeah.
Oh, Gore-Tex is going to solve all the periodontal problems in the world. So Carl is kind of bringing the real stuff to it. Here's the goods, here's the bad, that kind of thing. And he got done with a lecture on using Gore-Tex and membranous bone grafts and allografts and all that. It was pretty heady stuff. And he got all done with it. And so Carl and I were sitting down afterwards. We're kind of debriefing. And I said, Carl, I said, that lecture was really, really well put together. Because I look at things from instructional design point of view, step 1, step 2, step 3 type of thing. I said, that lecture was really good. He said, I said, what's the key to it, Carl? How do you do that? He said, I'm very careful about only teaching what I think my students can do. I don't teach everything that I do. And what I really liked about that is that he respected the comfort zone of the audiences. He wasn't teaching something that only he could do for his ego. That wasn't Carl. What Carl was, Carl's personal mission was also the mission of the Mish Institute, was to set and elevate the standard of implant dentistry worldwide. He said that evening when I was sitting on the kitchen counter. And you know what? He did it. Well, you know the rest of the story. About 2 years ago, I get a call. Carl's got brain cancer. I'm thinking, wow, of all the people that shouldn't have that, it would be Carl. So I was talking to Carl. I called him. I said, Carl, and he already had the surgery, and he had a 1-year prognosis, and it was not great. And I went down there, and I spent my last day with Carl Mish. We went out to dinner, and we talked about old times, just like we are now. And even talking about it, I feel it. Because how many real, true mentors do you have in your life? I can think of 3. Actually 4. First one was a guy named Harold Robbins, general practitioner down in Port Charlotte, Florida. I placed my first implants in his practice. This goes back to 1978. First implant, Ramus frame implant. Patient's name was Bob Heimer. Incidentally, he called me a month ago. His implant has been placed, 41 years. Harold Robbins was my first mentor. He took me by the hand. I'm just a kid. I'm 28? And I go down there to Florida, and I flew my patients down. I'm all excited. And he puts the IV in the arm. They're kind of out, right? And we bang in this frame implant. And he and I had a terrific mentor-mentee relationship. He was about 25 years older than me. And he saw a fire in my belly, and I shut my mouth, and I listened, and I did just what he said to do. That was my first mentor. My second mentor is Jim Pride from the Pride Institute. See, I retired from clinical practice in 1995, 20 years. I've had 6 or 7 eye surgeries. This right eye crapped out on me, and I lost my depth perception. So I left clinical practice not because I wanted to, it's because I had to. Well, right after leaving practice, well, you know how it is. I had 2 kids in college, I had 2 homes, a bunch of mortgages and stuff like that. Plus I had a pre-existing condition, Howard, of the crossed eye. And so I had the disability insurance didn't pay, right? So I needed to eat. You know how that is. So I was doing these programs. I was doing a program called Speak Like a Leader. And what I was doing, a lot of people would approach me. They said, wow, Homoly, you're so, you tell stories from the front of the room and you're fun and funny. How do you do that? I said, well, I don't know. I just do it. They said, well, can you teach me how to do that? And I said, oh, well, here's an opportunity. So I started and Joe Blaze went through that program. A lot of the early pioneers went through that program. And, well, a woman named Mary Allwan was one of Jim Pride's top consultants when she took the program. And she took the program 2 or 3 days later, and I knew of Jim Pride, but I never talked to him. I see him on the stage, but you know how it is. Everybody goes up there, and I'm thinking, I'll give him the space. 2 or 3 days later, I get a phone call. Hello, Dr. Homoly, this is Jim Pride. and he said, I don't know who in the hell you are, but Mary Allwan thinks you're pretty good, and I'd like you. And then he invites me to go to the Pride Institute, which is just across the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. So a couple weeks later, I fly up there. You'll like this story. I fly up there, and I got my 3-piece gray suit. Carl Mish always dressed really dapper, so I had to dress dapper too. So I go to the Mish Institute. I go to the Pride Institute. I sit in the big waiting room, and it's got all the awards from the Scandinavian Dental Association and Dental Economics and all these awards that Jim Pride had. It was like being in a race car driver's trophy room. It was just overwhelming. So I'm sitting there and I'm flipping through a copy of Dental Economics, and I look down the hall, and here he comes. He just had a hip replaced, so he was walking with a little bit of a gait. He comes up to me and he does this. Jim Pride. It was like meeting the Statue of Liberty. I thought, how good is that? We go in his office. His desk was as wide as this room. I'm sitting behind the desk. He's sitting like 10 feet from me. It's a big desk. He owned Pride Mountain Vineyards. Right? He had these big magnums all over the room. First thing he says to me, turns around in his chair, picks up one of these magnums. He says, see this? This is Pride Special Reserve or something. I don't know anything about wine. He said, this is Pride Special Reserve. You know why the White House wanted me to, you know why the White House wanted this wine? Because they wanted the President of France to taste the good wine. That's how our conversation started. I thought, holy smokes, I am not in Kansas now. This is the real deal. We talked for about 10 minutes. He says, come on, I'll show you the winery. We go out. I got the 3-piece suit on now, right? He's got this old beater Suburban, right? We jump in, we drive 2 hours up to his winery. He said, come on, I want to show you something. So we're walking around the winery and the slopes. There's not a flat spot out there. We're rocking, and we had the best conversation about dentists and what they need to do to lead their practice and who are our friends and who are our enemies. And at the end of that conversation, he invited me to become part of the Pride Institute, not as a consultant, but as a collaborator. And for the next 3 years, Jim Pride and I kind of hopped around the country together. It was an amazing experience. Then one day, I get the call. Homoly, I got bladder cancer. Couple years. And then 6, 8 months later, he was gone. That kind of thing. Yeah, it was tough. My third mentor, Carl Mish. We already talked about Carl. Carl could think past, he could think past problems relative to implant placement, prosthetic reconstruction. He created the nomenclature for bone density, implant prosthetics. How difficult would it be to practice dentistry if we didn't have a GB Black nomenclature or angle classifications or Kennedy classifications? See, when you have the nomenclature, now you can communicate in shorthand. Carl did that, and that is just, oh, what a contribution. My fourth mentor, Brandon Dawson. Brandon Dawson is the CEO of a group named Stratus Dental Group. And what Stratus Dental Group is a very innovative company that supports dental service organizations. They don't run dental practice. They don't have a dental practice. It isn't like they own a bunch of dental practice. What they do is they consult with DSOs, and their mission is to make the DSO community even stronger, making it better for patients and providers and the profession. Brandon approached me about 3 years ago and gave me the vision. He said, this is what we're trying to do. Brandon had innovated the audiology market. He aggregated audiology practices and created an enormous organization, an enormous database on the doctor-patient relationships. And he showed me some of this stuff. And it was breathtaking. And I looked at that and I said, I've never seen anything like this, right? And so for the last 2 years, actually last 2.5 years, I've been working with Stratus Dental Group. They have asked me to contribute to their case acceptance program. They have an outstanding content development team. And you know what's interesting? When you work with large organizations, when you work with professional organizations, business organizations, they bring a different energy and a different momentum to the practice of dentistry. Understand that right now the DSO, the Dental Service Organization, that's probably the hottest topic out there right now. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, they're all over. Back in 2011, I get the call from Western Dental. I don't know if you know anything about Western Dental.
Yeah, the founder just died a few years ago.
Was that right?
Yeah, after, I think he had yeah.
So Western Dental calls me and says, hey, we want you to come out and see what you can do for us. What was it? Gruenbaum. I forget his first name. He was an attorney that was the CEO, okay? Gruenbaum, he was kind of like if he was a machine, he'd be a bulldozer. Hey! That kind of guy, you know? Come on out, show us what you can do. So I went out there, and I don't know if you know much about Western, but it's a very modest care, right? 50% of the patients are Hispanic speaking only. The majority of the dentists at the time were foreign born. Culturally, very difficult, okay? And you know what? I thought, hey, come on, I taught at the Mish Institute. I spoke with Peter Dawson and John Coyce and all the big dogs. I know how to use a semi-adjustable articulator, and I understand occlusion, right? Western Dental, I thought, oh man, I don't know. But I went out there, and what was interesting is I spent a couple days there, and it wasn't the dentist, and it wasn't the CEO that compelled me to accept the job assignment. It was looking at the patients in the waiting room. You see, the waiting room's held maybe 40 people, Howard. There'd be 60 people sitting in there and another 15 or so outside smoking cigarettes, okay? Not pretty, right? But when I looked at the kids, and most of the patients were kids, right? And I looked at those kids and I realized if I had been born in Los Angeles, I would have been one of those kids. My dad was a carpenter with an 8th grade education. My mom worked at Mario's Hamburgers. Right? I remember going to Dr. Malky, that was our dentist's name, right? He had the old pedals and the belt, right? I would have been one of those patients. So I thought, why should what I know about the doctor-patient relationship, what do I know about creating great, why should what I know about creating great patient experiences only be a special for doctors with FAGD degrees? Why not try it here? Well, I did. It was a great experience. It took me about 2.5 years to do it. I worked with their content development team. We put these processes together. We made videos, trainer programs, and I came out of there going, wow, what an experience. Well, right after that, Pacific Dental Services contacted me, Steve Thorne. Completely different organization. Steve has got a heart of gold. His dentists are compelled. I met so many good people there. You know, the DSOs, you know what the gossip about the DSOs. If you're a DSO dentist, you're a rotten dentist. You don't know what the hell you're doing. I would make a bet. If you take all the bad dentists in the world, the majority of the bad dentists aren't in DSOs. They're out there. And it just so happens that DSO is new. It's disruptive technology. But you know what? I'll name some other disruptive technology. Implant dentistry. What was that field like when I first started, right? Believe me, I got a lot of arrows in my back, right? I was not loved for doing that. Cosmetic dentistry, you remember that? They called cosmetic dentists bondologists. They were Ross Nash, a good buddy of mine in Charlotte.
Love Ross Nash.
Love Ross, right?
Aren't all the greatest dentists bald? Ross Nash,
Exactly.
Peter Dawson.
They're all the good
All
ones.
the great ones are
All
bald.
the great ones. Implant dentistry, one time disrupted. You shouldn't be doing it, it's bad for dentistry. Cosmetic dentistry, shouldn't be doing it, it's bad for dentistry. Dental advertising, shouldn't be doing it, it's bad for dentistry. DSOs, shouldn't be doing it, it's bad for dentistry. Dentistry has a natural aversion to disruptiveness. But you know what? You take those four now, you take the first three, implants, cosmetics, and marketing, every high-end clinical guru is involved in some level of that. It is mainstream. It takes a decade, Howard, for dentists to get over disruptiveness. So when I look at the DSO market, I thought, wow, this is disruptive, this is new. So when Steve Thorne asked me to join the organization, again, join meaning as a consultant, and I helped co-author their case acceptance stuff. And again, I work with great people. I don't want to take credit for their success. I'm not. I was a player, but I brought my spin on how dentists can make it immediately and overwhelmingly obvious to patients that they're in the right dental practice. How do you do that? How do you take that and make it work in the culture where there's high patient flow, young practitioners, right? There's some cultural stuff there. Well, I spent 2.5 years at Pacific doing that. Plus, now, in the past and now, I lead their speaker development program. I work with internal team members. I work with external team members, teaching them how to go to mainstream dentists, go to mainstream dental meetings and talk about what they do as dentists within a dental service organization. They testify in front of state boards. They go to large conferences, and I'm partially responsible for that. Well, my next lily pad that I hopped to was Stratus Dental with Brandon Dawson. I think Brandon Dawson is, if he was a dentist, he'd be like Carl Mish, to tell you the truth. He's so far first that sometimes, well, you know how it is. He's disruptive in the sense that he's innovative. And what he's bringing to the DSO market, I think, will be good for it. It's just a matter of time before they recognize it. And I've loved working there. And we're 2.5 years into it. Most of my time has been spent with the content development team, working with a process they call Patients for Life. It's a process that he perfected over the last 14 years in the audiology market.
Do you know what the first DSO was in dentistry?
Yeah, it was Sears. It was at Sears Clinic.
No.
What was that?
100 years ago, they started affordable dentures.
Yeah.
And they have 100 locations. And my first and only turn off to dentistry was when I got out and I was taking all these courses. So many of the high ends would start the presentation back in the 80s. They'd say, you have your A patients and your B patients.
And your C patients.
And your C and your D. And when they start describing the C or a D, I'm like, okay, that's the whole Farran family tree going back to Ireland.
Exactly right.
And they would say you don't want to deal with these types of people. And then
get the C's out of your practice to make room for the A's and B's.
I know, and I'm like,
I
that
did exactly
C
the
is
opposite.
my mom, dad, 5 sisters, every uncle. I'm like, I mean, we were the high class ones in Wichita. The low class ones were back in Parsons, Kansas.
Right.
And the reason affordable dentures could expand so well is because dentistry never wanted to treat the poor.
Right.
So affordable started going to all the poor areas.
Right.
So then Western Dental, that's probably the second oldest one.
Okay.
Same thing. They went out in California. They said all these dentists want to live in Beverly Hills.
That's right.
Or maybe the middle class. And Western said, what, no one's going to treat all these poor Hispanics from San Diego to San Fran? And now the smartest DSO, in my opinion, I mean, I love, and by the way, if anybody says that DSOs are bad, Rick Workman has got to be one of the most quality guys ever. Steve Thorne, did you see his 100 wells on
Oh, yeah,
video?
the whole freshwater thing.
I mean, he went to Ethiopia with his
He does it every
money
year. He does it every year.
And dug 100 wells, and you should see that video. I mean, these are people that probably don't know the moon goes around the earth. I mean,
Right.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
And but Aspen, where's Fontana going?
Right.
He goes where all the poor people live, and there's more money in McDonald's than there is Ruth's Chris. And you go to all the high-end lectures like Nordstrom's.
I know.
None of my homies go to Nordstrom's.
Right.
My homies all go. I mean, my family tree doesn't go to a restaurant unless there's pictures of the food on the menu. And you're talking Waffle House and IHOP. And
I like Waffle House. I rode a motorcycle for years. I eat at Waffle House.
And now I'm a successful dentist, and I know if there's no pictures of food on the menu, it's going to be real expensive and not taste as good as the IHOP.
Well, you know, Howard, that's the seduction. You see, here's the big seduction in dentistry. See if you can identify with this. You graduate dental school, you got this vision, you end up taking a course, and you end up at an institute. And there's a lot of great institutes, right? This is not a negative remark about institutes or anything. But so you get the vision of, wow, I want to be a complete care dentist. And what happens is you get seduced into believing that you should be treating dental diseases of the rich. That people come in and they're going to lay down and play dead for you, and you're going to be able to do all this dentistry. And what you don't want the blue collar guy, you don't want that. You want a high-end kind of a thing. It's that pseudo-elitism that's kind of a tacit message at times.
All my idols not only hang out with the poor, they treat the poor, and they can even make money on the poor.
Yeah.
Southwest Airlines, IKEA, Walmart. If you only want to hang out with the rich, there's something's wrong with you.
Right.
You know, you should be able to sit on a park bench and talk to the president of the United States and a homeless man in the same way.
So for the last several years, I've been really the core of my business has been helping to develop the dentist within the DSO market. The second piece that I've been doing is I lead key opinion leader trainer programs. What does that mean? You know, when you go to these conferences and some guys at the front of the room talking about CEREC or talking about some 3D imaging thing or talking about some restorative material, companies that make these things have their champions. Typically, they're the best customers. And these best customers, most often they're in their mid to late 40s or early 50s, right? They've made it good in dentistry, but they're really seeking more self-actualization. They would like to become leaders. They would like to be able to, they want to show what they know in a good way. And so I'm hired by manufacturers to train the folks to go out to be a product advocate. Not a salesperson, but a product advocate. How do you put a talk together? How do you do that? And how do you do it such that audience members will actually listen? How do you get away from the endless clickety of the slides? And the funny thing is about this key opinion leader program, it all started years ago. A guy named Bill Wathen. Bill Wathen is a former editor of the ADA Journal. Bill was head of continuing education at Baylor University, and me and Hill Tatum and Mark Davis teaching implant programs down there, right? So we're coming in there, we're teaching these programs, and there's a bunch of people in the room, a bunch of dentists in the room. Bill Wathen is, and I didn't know Bill. I had no idea who Bill was. And so it was my turn to speak. So I get up there. You know that poem, Casey at the Bat? It's an old poem about Casey's the big slugger. It's written in iambic pentameter. Grade kids learn it. And the whole deal is that Casey's at the bat. It's the bottom of the ninth. The bases are full. He can win the game. And what happens? He strikes out. Well, I took the words to Casey at the bat and I replaced it with implant language. And my program was called Taking the Dent Out of Dentistry. That is how to manage complications and failures in implant dentistry. And what I did is every time, it's really hard to pick up a camera when one of your cases sits in a chair and the patient goes, is this supposed to come out and there's an implant button sheared off? It's really hard to pick up a camera at that moment, but I did. And so I started taking pictures of all my complications and failures, and I showed him. Well, Bill Wathen, between the poem and the failures, he said, Homoly, he says, would you teach I said, I don't teach speaking, I'm a dentist. He said, no, you can do it. So we put a program together. He called it Teach the Teachers, and he paid me like $500. I flew down to Baylor, and we had 4 guys in the room. They were faculty members. And you know what? I found that I loved doing it. I loved doing it. And so over the years, then I joined the National Speakers Association. I've been a member of the National Speakers, and they're headquartered here.
Right, and Naomi Rhodes,
Naomi
Smart Practice.
Yeah, absolutely.
She was the president one time.
She was the president, absolutely. So I was a member of the National Speakers Association and went up through the ranks. And I have the highest earned designation in professional speaking called Certified Speaking Professional. And I was the first dentist in the world to get it. So what's happened with my career is that Ormco, Noble Biocare, Sorona, Dentsply, Ivoclar, market leaders, I work with market leaders to train their key opinion leaders. That is, how do you put a program together? How do you keep your audiences interested? Howard, how many times do you sit in a lecture hall and you're listening to this, some guy show the slides, and after the fourth slide you just drip off because they're boring. They're narrating the slides. They're not performing, they're narrating. And what I teach is how to be an interesting expert. Well, I ended up writing a book on it. It's called Just Because You're an Expert Doesn't Make You Interesting. And I love the work. So being a key opinion leader, a trainer, has allowed me to interface with great companies and great dentists. And it's been really fulfilling for me. The third piece, as far as what I'm up to now, okay? What I'm up to now. My relationship with Stratus is strong. My relationship with the key opinion leader piece is strong. Here's my third piece. I want to go back to basics. I want to go back to mentoring. See, one of the things I loved about the Mish Institute is that this dentist would show up and he'd have his patient, he'd have four of his assistants there.
Yeah.
And they'd put the patient in the chair, and I would be the mentor. I would sit there and watch this guy, his hand shaking, cutting the bone, and stuff like that. And I'd spend 4 or 5 hours with this person preoperatively, looking at the x-rays and the models, then going into the room with him, kind of coaching him, keeping him safe so he doesn't, make a big mistake. Let him make the little ones, not the big ones, right? And then do the post-op with him and then get on the phone with him. I really enjoyed that one-on-one. Well, I've gotten away from that, working in the corporate world and working in the DSOs. So what I'm going to do here in the Phoenix area, and I hope you can help me with this, is I want to start maybe just a handful of mastermind groups and get back to the dentist who really wants to provide quality care. I'm not talking about seeing 100 new patients a month. I'm talking about the dentist who is invested in their continuing education, who is knowledgeable about occlusion, dental materials, restorative dentistry, implant dentistry, and they want to do comprehensive care, but they're stuck. They're stuck because they're using some behavioral models that don't really work with that type of patient. They're relying on some old thinking that really doesn't work with the comprehensive care patient. I want to get back to that. And one of the reasons I want to get back to this, I used to do that. But you see now, for me, I'm 20 years downstream from this guy that needs to know it. So I got all this accrued wisdom. What I want to do is say, I want to go back to that. I want to become a student again. I want to learn how the millennials think. When you and I were coming up, how did we learn? We sat in a classroom and we're looking at slides and taking notes. The millennials now, they're learning looking at a screen.
Oh, I know. More people get on Dentaltown from the iPhone than from a PC.
They're looking at the screen. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I think that's great. I'm going to be involved. I spent all day yesterday in the studio.
I already have more views on this podcast than our online CE courses. I mean, they're different. And,
Yeah.
and you know what? The first one that taught me, she said, look at that, your dumb big screen TV.
Yeah.
She says, put your iPhone out there and pull it in until you can't see your TV. And it's like right here.
Yeah.
He said, I'd rather lay in bed and prop this up on a pillow.
Yeah.
And this has more pixels per square inch than your TV.
Yeah.
They'll sit in a hammock with a Heineken and learn how to place implants.
Yeah. Well, and I love it, but that's not a substitute for a one-on-one. And I'm not saying I want to do one-on-ones. What I want to do is small groups. There's a good contagious energy when you put 4 or 5 dentists who are aligned in a room and you get the conversation going. And to tell you the truth, I've reached a point in my life to where contribution is becoming very important to me. It's like my first 20 years as a dentist, it was about consumption, buying cars and houses and getting through marriages and and all that stuff. You got some experience there.
Yeah, that costs more than dental school.
Yeah. But now what I'm looking at is a sense of contribution. How can I contribute to this new generation to give them a sense of what real mentorship is like. And that's what I'm going to do here.
So I graduated $87,000 in student loans.
Nice.
And to get a divorce costs 43 times that amount.
Yikes.
So all you kids out there saying, I got $350,000 in student loans. Yeah, you wait. Someday you'll give your
was it worth it?
It actually was, because I got
so you got your money's worth.
Oh, I did. Yeah. I met my ex when I was 14. I think got married at 24. Got 4 amazing boys.
Yeah.
But you know what? Sometimes when you meet someone at 14, you're different 30 years later.
Oh, absolutely. It happened to my wife and I. My first wife, Patty.
Yeah.
I mean, we dated in high school. We ended up having the Immaculate Conception. As a matter of fact, we had the Immaculate Conception twice. It was a miracle. I tried explaining that to her father. It didn't go over really well.
I remember one time I spent the night at my ex's house before we got married, and her dad said, I don't want you sleeping in the same room with my daughter because I don't trust you. I said, trust me, dude. I'm sleeping with your daughter. No, I'm just kidding. That was a joke. I want to go over, you've written so many books. Let's go over some of the books. Oh, but by the way, I want to say,
What do you got there?
You wrote Dentists and Endangered Species.
That was my first book.
A survival guide for fee-for-service care.
That's right. That book was...
Talk about that book. Is that still...
Yes, it's still available, but you know what? That was written probably a year or two after I left practice. I left practice in 1995, so that was probably 1997-ish.
Oh my God, look at people who bought that book on Amazon also bought my book, Uncomplicated Business.
Look at that. I love it. And we got 5 stars. We got 5 stars.
And we both have 5 stars. But anyway, so is that, talk about that book. What are the lessons from that book for my homies?
Dentists and Endangered Species. Back then, that's when a lot of managed care came in. That's when some of the early DSOs start, and there was this big deal, like chicken lick and the sky is falling, dentists are going to be an endangered species. There's so many negative market factors. And what the book is about is, no, if you want to protect yourself, the way out of managed care is up. And what I meant by that is up your ability to treat comprehensively. You're going to put yourself in a market niche that people are going to want. That's what I did. Working on poor people, doing big cases, and I did them all day long. Howard, now understand, I started dental implants in 1978, and in a 20-year interval of time, I placed 4,500, I restored 4,500 partially or totally edentulous patients in a 20-year period of time. That was before, half of my career was before Brandemark, right? And 3/4 of my career was before they started teaching implants in dental schools. So I was bareback as far as all the good stuff that's going on right now. So Dentists and Endangered Species was a call to dentists to improve. And that book opened so many doors for me, because what it did, it struck a nerve with the dentist who wanted to be more complete care dentist, but really didn't have no one gave them permission. See, there's the word. No one gave them permission to think a little bit differently about how to talk to patients. Typically, Howard, the prevailing wisdom back then on case acceptance, here's what it was. It was educate, educate, educate. Show patients study models and teach them everything, and talk about quality and centric relation and tertiary anatomy. And the more you do that, the better you are. I did that for about 5 years, and one day I woke up and I said, a lot of this stuff's simply it's not working. So what I did is I just took a contrarian point of view. I asked myself, what if you didn't need to do any of it? What if you just needed to make good eye contact and tell some stories and get them to trust and like you? And then don't worry about the education so much, but build a relationship. After you build a relationship and then determine what they can afford, what they're ready for, when they're ready to start, right before they're ready to start, that's when I would sit down and say, well, Howard, before we do any of this, right, you need to know the benefits, risks, and alternatives to care. And that's when I would educate. I wouldn't use education as a sales tool. That's what holds dentists back, is they use education as a sales tool. They think patient education is the same as influence. It's not. And yet, where do you go, Howard? Where do you go in dentistry today? Where do you go to learn the process of influence? Here's the answer. I don't know. Where do you go to learn how to educate a patient? Everywhere, right? You see, we have a cultural bias against what they call the soft skills. You go to every major dental meeting, right? Let's say it's a 3-day meeting, and there's 3 general sessions in the morning and then 30 different breakouts in the afternoon, right? Now, how many of those breakout sessions are on influence? How many of those breakout sessions are on the behavioral skills for dentists? I'll tell you how many. Not enough. Not enough. So Dentists in Endangered Species was saying, guys, here you go. I'm giving you permission.
You know, you teach speakers how to speak,
Yeah.
and you're talking about PowerPoints, clicking, put everybody
Right.
to sleep, the dentist over-educating, the patients don't buy. I cut my teeth on a stand-up comedy. I did every open mic. I've done stand-up comedy at every comedy club in this valley.
Yeah.
And I think stand-up is the purest deal because you don't get any props. You don't get any PowerPoint. You get a flipping mic.
Right.
And this crowd, I mean, it just you got to communicate and you got to connect. And I tell everybody that if you want to really double your practice, go be a bartender on Friday night and learn how to talk to people.
Learn how to talk to
Go
people.
do stand-up. Go do improv.
Right.
And some of the worst speakers in dentistry, I've seen them give their best performance when the airplane lost their carousels.
Right.
And they were in the breakup room having a meltdown. I don't have my slides.
I don't have my slide, yeah.
I said, my God, would you need 6 carousels of slides to go talk about your wife and kids and grandkids?
Right.
I mean, if you need 6 carousels of slides to talk about your family, and then they went out there, I mean, literally shaking and in tears at the
Right.
convention green room, and then they went out there and gave the best damn seminar on the life because they didn't have any crutches.
Right.
They didn't have a PowerPoint, and we're standing behind a podium. The one guy refused to go on stage because he didn't have a suit. He was in tennis shoes and sweats and a shirt. And
That's
I'm
happened
back
to you.
there.
That's happened to me.
Yeah. And I was like, dude, this is going to be the best. As soon as you quit crying and freaking out and shitting
Right.
your pants, just get out there, look
Get
at
out
these
there and do
dentists, and talk from the heart. And at the first break, they're like, oh my God, this is awesome.
This is awesome.
And
Yeah.
that's why I never liked that redheaded comedian. What was that redheaded? Carrot Top.
Carrot
Those
Top.
guys that take the little talking things out there. You know what? If you're going to be in comedy, keep it pure. Keep your toy box and your puppets. You know, go out there and keep the art pure. And this is how you talk to a patient.
Yeah.
And this is, I mean, I've done so many seminars where I never even advanced my slide to slide 2.
Yeah.
And no one came up to me and said, we're still on the first slide. If you
Right.
need a slide, it's great. But I want to switch gears before I cover all your books.
Yeah.
I think for me, and when most of my friends who you're there, Carl Mish, or you're there, Jim Pride,
Right.
it was because most dentists think they're a good dentist because they got a bunch of alphabet soup behind their names and all the bonding agents, they went all the patient soup.
Sure.
But the data is really clear. 3 humans have to call their office before the receptionist can convert 1 to come into a chair. And then when you look at 100 million insurance claims filed, and I'm not talking about veneers and implants and
Right.
all the stuff. I'm talking about just a cavity.
Right.
Our homies only do 38% of so 1 in 3. So it takes 3 people to get 1 human to come in, and you need 3 humans to come in who each have a cavity for you to fix 1. And then your question to me is, what's the best bonding agent? Dude, you don't even remove the decay 2 out of 3 times. And that girl up there who you say is wonderful and she's been with you 10 years, 2 people hang up and call someone else for everyone that comes in. And I think you have the ability, you have the most ability to make all the dentists twice as good, because if they all listen to your treatment plan acceptance and just got 2 out of 3 people to drill, fill, and build. And as far as bonding materials, I would any day if you said to me, here's the deal, right now you remove the decay 1 out of 3 times and replace it with the greatest stuff from Ivoclar and 3 MSP, or we'll get them to remove all the decay and we'll pack them with butter. I'll take butter
Take
over
butter.
Ivoclar 3M any day of the week. I mean, they can't even, and I've seen you so many times with your treatment plan, case acceptance.
Right.
I know so many dentists that I can remember back in the day in the 80s. Everybody, when you were electioning, go at the break and says, I mean, you were selling $25,000 cases in North Carolina in the 80s.
Yes.
I don't even know what that would be worth. And you were selling them hand over fist because you could sell. And a dentist says selling is a 4-letter word. Well, buddy, when you say you don't like selling dentistry, when you say you didn't go to dental school for that,
Yeah.
you're a bad dentist. Because imagine if you're a fireman,
Right.
and you could only put out 1 out of 3 houses on fire. You'd be fired.
Right.
I mean, a fireman puts out 3 out of 3.
Yeah.
And a dentist puts out 1 out of 3 and thinks he's a good dentist.
Yeah. You know,
So my question is this: is selling a 4-letter word?
No, selling is a gift. Selling is, I mean, you think about it. If patients aren't accepting your care, everything that you've put into your career is at risk. Your patient, the patient experience before, during, and after treatment. But let's just go before and in the case presentation process. During that experience, if you rely, if your mindset is all about, I'm a quality dentist and I'm going to preach quality to this patient. See, here's the irony. Good dentistry doesn't guarantee good patient experiences. Every dentist in America would agree with that. They did this beautiful case. It's beautiful. Look at the margins. Look at the contours. Look at this. But the patient's pissed off because the girl at the front desk was snotty, or the dentist couldn't make eye contact, or they think that something's going screwy, or the hygienist got snippy and they were criticizing. You see, it's all those little things.
Oh, yeah.
It's all those little things. But the seduction is all the letters after the name. I'm a quality dentist, right? The seduction disconnects. And I tell dentists, I said, don't put these people that we call patients in the role of patient. Keep them in the role of person. Learn to talk to them about what's going on in their life. One of the biggest issues is patient readiness, especially for those cases that are like $8,000, $10,000, $12,000 and greater. Patient comes and got a lot of problems. You come in, I'm the dentist, you come in. You got a lot of problems. This, and this, and you should be doing this, and let me show you 3 different ways to do 5 different things. And when you leave there, your head's kind of spinning, right? Now, I know about your conditions, but I don't know anything about you personally. And this is not about making friends with patients. You see, there's a difference between being empathetic and being nice. What dentists, especially at this complete care level, need to realize is that sometimes patients simply aren't ready. And readiness is based on the fit issues of the patient, their budget, their time, their health, what they're doing in their life. Patients get a lot of stuff going on in their life. And you know what, Howard? Getting their teeth fixed may not be first in line. Maybe first in line is losing weight, or getting a divorce, or closing the business, or getting the kids out of college. So what you got to do is you got to get in line. But you need to know where you are in line. And once you understand the readiness of the patient, once you understand that, so let's say here you are, you got a bunch of problems. So I'm talking to you, this is before the exam now, right? You got a bunch of problems. And I'm saying, well, terrific, Howard, I understand you don't like the appearance of your front teeth. I can understand it. Any other, well, you don't like this, you don't like this. I said, well, give me a sense of it. How does this get in your way? I mean, is it a work thing? Is it a personal thing? Tell me about a time when it really bothers you. Or tell me about the first time. And what I do is I get them into narrative. I get them into storytelling. And then I listen. See, I listen. And listening is not waiting for your turn to talk. Listening is connecting with patients. So I get them to talk. And then I get them to talk about, well, hey, I see you live here in Arizona. I live in Arizona, or my brother lives in Arizona, or I'm from Chicago and you're from Chicago. I find something to talk about. And what I try to do is understand what's going on in their life with their family, what's important to them, right? Those are all called fit issues. And now when I present dentistry, let's say now it's your next appointment and you're going to come in and I'm going to present you care, right? I said, Howard, I know that you're really concerned about the appearance of your front teeth because you're teaching at school and you've had some self-conscious moments in front of students. I understand that. I also know that you got a couple boys in school. I know that you're doing some travel and that your wife is starting a new business. The reason I mention that is you got a lot going on in your life. I know I can get you comfortable with your appearance, but I don't know how this fits for you. This may not be the right time. Can you help me understand that a little bit better? Now there's a presentation. Because see, what I'm doing is I'm trying to understand your level of readiness, and patients are surprised by that. Well, doc, I can, I can tell you, whether this will work for me if you can tell me how much it costs, how long it will take, and how much my insurance. So you see what they're asking me now. And that gives me a sense of where they are. I said, well, Howard, a case like yours could be anywhere from $5,000 to $8,000. Typically, it takes us about 2 to 3 months for a case like yours. We're really good working with patient financing. Joy, my office manager, will help you with that. Does that fit for you, or do we need to look at maybe spreading treatment out maybe over time? What's best for you now? See, what I'm not... Now, you could say, well, you're not educating the patient. Here's what I'm doing with the patient. I'm letting them educate me. That's the deal, is you let patients educate you as to what they need to make a decision. I learned 2 things. Patients need 2 things. Number one, I'm talking about the complex care patient. Now, that case, it's greater than, let's say, $5,000, $6,000. Patients need for dentists to make their decision process simple. We do just the opposite. Well, let me show you 5 different ways to do 6 different things. Here, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. We can fix it like this, or we can fix it like that, or we can fix it like this. You see, they make the decision process far too complicated. So the first thing patients need is for us to make the decision process simple. Second thing they need an experience of being understood. This whole thing with patient education, don't come away thinking that I'm against patient education. No, this is not the deal. I'm saying education is not the same as influence. And it's influence that gets people to take action. It's like if you're trying to lose weight. You get all excited, you go to the dietitian. She says, oh, here you go. And she gives you a manual with all your stuff. Here's what you're going to eat. Here's what you're going to do. And you're all excited about it. And you go home, and you put it there, and 2 days later, you're back to eating bagels and drinking Coke, right? A month later, you go in your closet, and you put on your jeans. You can't put them on. You try another, you can't put them on either, right? You thought, oh, hell. You go back to the kitchen cupboard. You take out the manual. See, now you're influenced. So much of what we can do as dentists is help patients imagine how they're going to feel, as opposed to what we're going to do to the teeth. See, what we do to the teeth, we're going to prep them, put a temporary on it, we're going to do this. That's all process-centered language. We're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. If you needed 8 laminate veneers and a couple of bridges, you went to 3 different dentists, I guarantee you what will happen is you get 3 mini dental educations. Here's what process-centered conversations are how-to conversations. And nobody will know what's going on in your life, what needs to fit in your life, how soon you can do the work, what you can afford. I remember going down to the Pankey Institute. I went through all of Pankey, all of Dawson. And I love them, and I think...
So did I.
Dawson, I think Coyce, I think Spear, they're gifts to dentistry. They really are. But where I got sideways with some of that is that it was so heavy on education. And you know what? I wasn't doing half of it, but I was doing more dentistry than anybody in the class.
Right.
And I'm thinking, I'm getting away with something here, because I didn't educate my patients out of the office. I didn't make the decision process complicated. The second thing patients need to know...
Just slight interruption. How many dentists did you know that were doing $2 to $4 million went to the Pankey Institute and dropped it all after a year because it made them go from $2 to $4 million to like $1 million a year trying to do all this stuff? Finally, said, "Okay, I don't have time for all this. I'm going to go back to my $2 or $4 million practice."
I'm going to go to my point. And that's not Pankey's fault. That's not Dawson's fault. Not at all. What they were teaching, and they still teach, is state-of-the-art of dentistry. You know what they say, dentistry is an art and a science. Well, I think they're 2/3 right. The third piece is that it's a behavioral competency, and that's the piece that's missing for a lot of folks. But the illusion is...
It's a behavioral...
competency.
Yeah.
Behavioral competency. And that's what influence is. Education is a thinking
But one
process.
thing about the occlusion, I mean, I gotta credit my homies. I mean, they'll all tell you that if they went to 10 different occlusions, TMJ centers,
Right.
they're gonna get 10 different theories on TMJ. There's how many camps of occlusion? How many times has the condyle moved since we've graduated from dental school.
It moves every year.
It moves every year. So,
to tell you the
so
truth,
and then there was that Reader's Digest study. Remember when they took FMX study models of 30 different dentists?
Right.
And Reader's Digest got 30 different treatments.
Right.
So then the NIDR said, is that true? Yeah. So they went to 100, and only 2 treatment plans were the same, and that was the 2 dentists who said you needed nothing.
You needed nothing.
And then 3 through 100 were all different treatment plans.
Right. In the top treatment plan, is the one that I thought he was the only guy that got it right. I remember that study.
Yeah.
The second thing patients need is that experience of being understood. And that's the mirror image of patient education. That's the mirror image of it. We spend so much time telling patients, here's what you need to know, I'm going to educate, I'm going to educate, I'm going to educate you. To be a doctor is to be a teacher. You know that whole thing, right? I don't disagree with that, but that's a limiting belief. In that what we need to do is really understand people. Understanding people means what's going on in their life. How do they need to fit this in their life? You're going to buy a house, right? You're going to buy a house. You go into your realtor, you're going to sit down and you start telling them about price range and what you want and stuff like this. Oh, incidentally, this realtor is a former dentist, right? And this guy is Mr. Fix-It, kind of former dentist, and he's going to sell you a house like he sold his dentistry. So you're talking about where you want to live in the neighborhood, and he stops you. Goes, now wait, before you start telling me all about neighborhoods and schools, we need to talk about the foundation. The foundation of the house is most important, right? There are 3 different types of foundations. You got cement slab, crawl space, cement blocks. There's 4 different types of cement blocks, 6 different types of cement block joints. Here's a photomicrograph of a cement block joint. What the hell would you think? You think about finding a different realtor. You see it's those how to build it. That's why my brother's a carpenter. He can't sell a house. He'll tell you how to build one. But see, what the great realtors do is they get to know, okay, well, what do you need? How will it fit? Right? Now, and if you're calling what I'm talking about selling, bring it on. Okay? So for me, it's language is, they're approximations of really what we mean. Words are symbols. And selling is a transaction. I get it, right? But relationships are more than that. Relationships, if we can excel at relationships, a lot of good would happen in dentistry. A lot of good. And the things that are important to me is my heart really goes out for these guys who are mid-career. They've built a big office. They've got a family going, young kids. They got a wife who's maybe working at the front desk or something, right? They're in debt, a lot. And they've been to the institutes. They're all dressed up and all ready to go. But they can't get out of the $2,000, $2,500 treatment plan range. They're stuck there. And after a while, they begin to get cynical. And then they begin to turn on their patients and turn on their team, and they get angry because the bills are there, kids are getting older, right? And now they're 45 and they're still doing dentistry like they're, 35, right? And they're not, I mean, what's the expectation when you go to a continuing education seminar? The expectation is that you'd be transformed in some way. When you leave there, you're better off when you started. Many times they're not. They'll have information, but they can't implement it because no one's really given them permission how to listen. No one's really given them permission to tell a story or to listen to their story. And this is not soft skills. This takes training. This takes a different mindset. And that's what I want to get back to. I want to get back into trenches. I'm not practicing dentistry again, but I would love getting together with some like-minded dentists, and I hope you can help me with this, okay? Like, maybe you join in, okay? Wouldn't that be fun? Like-minded dentists and say, guys, okay, here we go. Just listen to me. Do it. And I do this now. When I do private consulting, I got scrubs. I got Dr. Paul Homoly. I walk in. The dentist introduces me to their patient. I walk to the waiting room. I shake their hand. I bring them back. I bring them in the consult area. And the dentist is there. And I introduce myself as Dr. Paul Homoly. I'm a friend of the practice, and I'm here to help make you feel more comfortable in dental practice. Tell me a little bit about what you're hearing. And then they talk to me. And then this dentist sees me do it. And patients are putting online reviews. Oh, we had a great experience. I'm not saying I'm magic. I'm just saying that I'm disruptive in a good way, as you are. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, they were all specially selected to become dentists because they got A's in all this arcane physics and chemistry and biology.
I didn't get
and
A's in anything.
And those, that's why I like Facebook, because the logo of Facebook is an F, and it reminds me of all my high school grades. I'm like, oh my God, I'm back in high school. I want to go over some more of your. Do you mind, or do you need
No,
to
let's go. Let's go. I think we got good entry.
Another book you wrote, which I think, again, case acceptance. I mean, I don't know why a dentist takes 14,000 courses on bonding agents and asks me, are we on bonding agent? Are we on generation 7 or 8? It's like, who gives a shit, dude? You can't even talk 2 out of 3 people together. You wrote, isn't it wonderful when patients say yes? Case acceptance for complete dentistry.
Yep. That's my second book.
That was your second book. Talk about that book, and again, all your stars are all 5.
Yeah.
So that means your sister, girlfriend, neighbor.
All my friends bought the books.
All the friends bought the books.
The books sold like hotcakes. I just wish they'd sell like books. There you go. All right, here's the deal. The first book, Dentists and Endangered Species, opened the door for me, and I started teaching private workshops. I bring 10, 15 practices in. We do them in Charlotte. We do them in Las Vegas, Chicago. And what happens, you know how it is. When you start working with dentists, what happens, you get feedback. I visit practices. I'd spend time in their practices. So 3 or 4 years later, I had more wisdom. I said, you know what, it's time for another book. So the second book, Isn't It Wonderful When Patients Say Yes, is based on my life experiences as a trainer, as a coach, for that 2 or 3 year interval between the first and second book. The third book, called Making It Easy for Patients to Say Yes. That's 5 years later. And that
Who's that girl on the cover?
Some model.
Just a model?
Yeah, just a model. A lot of people think it's my daughter. It's not. My daughter complained about it. Why you should put me on the cover of your book? That's kind of the Bible, to tell you the truth. It's over 300 pages. It took me almost 3 years to write it. And it's a fairly definitive work. As a matter of fact, one of my projects this summer is I'm going to offer a second edition. I've evolved a lot of my tools through work with different practices, different DSOs, and I'm seeing where I need to teach better, where I need to be clearer. So Making It Easy for Patients to Say Yes will be revised, and it will be I'll make it a new offering.
Now, was that your last book?
No, that's
because
my third book.
You also wrote.
My fourth book is Just Because You're an Expert. No. My fourth book is Just Because You're Leading Doesn't Mean They'll Follow. That's a novel. That has been.
Is that about dentistry?
No, that's about a guy named Dan, who is the CEO of a large financial service organization in Chicago. And his mentor, a fellow named Stanley.
This is fiction that you wrote?
This is fiction.
This is fiction that you wrote?
Yeah.
Were you drinking wine when you wrote it?
A lot of it. A lot of it. It's been my favorite book to write. And what it is, it's kind of a Karate Kid kind of a story.
Yeah.
Where you got a high-end executive. Here's the story. Dan was a top salesperson for Granite Financial. That was the name of the financial firm. Dan did so well that his company promoted him into leadership. Well, what happens to great salespeople when they make them sales managers? Well, they don't do so well because sales is a different energy. So here Dan is now leading the company, and he found that all his energy and all his charisma as a salesperson really wasn't working well with his internal team. He could influence customers, but working with his team became a little bit more difficult. His office manager, Julie, suggested that Dan find a mentor in the previous CEO, a guy named Stanley. And the book is about Stanley and Dan working together in a mentor-mentee relationship. And it's completely applicable to dentistry, but there's not a dental word or dental term in it. It's called Just Because You're Leading Doesn't Mean They'll Follow.
You're a genius. You know why? In MBA school, I got my MBA from Arizona State University, and there was one course that nobody could teach, and it was operations logistics. And most people in MBA school said they go through the course, they still don't get it. And then there was this guy, and he was named, he wrote a fiction book. His name was Eli Goldrat, and he wrote a book, and I mean, it was, what was the name of that book? Here it is. But it was a love story. So it was this, God, I'm so old, it doesn't even make the first page of the Google Deal. Now he's written so many books. But what was the name of that book? Eli Goldrat. Huh. But anyway, it was so this husband every night would go home, and him and his wife would have dinner, and he would complain about the fact that they never used any calculus, no charts, no graphs. Right. And then he met this guy at a bar, and they would talk about what's wrong with the factory. And everybody at MBA school back in the day, they all figured out, all the MBA schools, that if they read this fiction book first, right, then they got it. Yeah. Then you could fill in all the charts and graphs and math and all that.
Well, that's what, just because you're leading doesn't mean they'll follow. It's you read it and it gives you the sense of story, gives you the sense of accomplishment, it gives you the sense of spirit. Plus, there's a bit of a love story in it too.
You got to have the love story. So then your last book was Just Because You're an Expert Doesn't Make You Interesting?
There you go. Just because you're an expert doesn't make you interesting. I wrote that book as support for my work with key opinion leaders. Because I teach it in a 2 or 3 day workshop. But you know how it is. You go to a workshop, you get all your notes, and, well, what did he say about this, or what did he say about that? So I wrote this book as kind of like a how-to book on how to be interesting, memorable, and influential in front of a room. And it's called Just Because You're an Expert Doesn't Make You Interesting.
You know what you might want to add to your local teaching deal? The Tempe Art Center has one of the most amazing improv classes and stand-up comedy classes. I think they're both like 6 week they're 6 week. But anyway, the 2 teachers there. And I think if any dentist, no matter where they lived, if they went and took improv lessons or stand-up comedy lessons, just one lesson, you would connect twice as well as
people. I did that in Charlotte. Charlotte had the Comedy Zone. And this is when I was still in practice, Howard. And so I get this mailer from the North Carolina School of the Arts, a 6-week stand-up comedy course at the Comedy Zone. And they gave the instructors names, and they're all stand-up comedians. And I said, hell, I can do that. I'm funny. People laugh at me all the time. I get in front of audiences, and I just tell dental stories, and this should be easy. It was the most challenging course I ever took. And you know what? And the people that really did well, the funniest person there was the Frito-Lay truck driver. She was this big, fat woman. She'd get up there and talk about her big, fat rear, and she'd wave it around, and people were crying. In graduation was we presented a 2-minute stand-up skit in front of 300 drunks at the Comedy Zone in Charlotte. I'm rarely nervous before a speaking event. As a matter of fact, it brings me energy. I calm down when I walk on stage. But that night, I just thought, wow, it is such an art.
I love that art.
Oh, it's such an art.
I get more high doing 30 minutes at one of these little comedy clubs. Yeah. I do all day. But that Frito lady, I want to meet her, because my favorite dinner to this day, my dad owned Sonic Drive-In, and it was a Frito chili pie. It was crushed Fritos on the bottom, then a spoon of chili, and then grated cheese on top. And then if that's not the best meal ever made, there never was. But but I think dentists should cross-train, because again, they'll go. Have you ever gone to a Gordon Christian seminar? I mean, 4 hours in the morning of all the wear rates of every filling known to man. It's like, is that a problem? Do people's fillings actually wear down? And then the whole afternoon is 4 hours of bonding agents. Right. Is that your other problem? Your fillings all wear down, then they fall out? Yeah. And then you go look at their deal and you say, okay, in 2016, you diagnosed 4,000 fillings and you did 800. Right. And you want to know more about bonding agents? I mean, you need, and then the other thing is, if they can't convince the person part of the money, because even those poor people that you're talking about going to Western Dental and Aspen and living with that, all Americans are going to spend all their money. I mean, 90%, a full in their money, always parked. Right. The rich people have a savings account, and the other 95%, if they get paid $1, they'll spend $1.10. Right. If they win the $1 million lottery, they'll be bankrupt in 4 years. That's amazing. The average player in the NFL is bankrupt how many years he was in the NFL. So the average player in the NFL is 3.5 years. Right. So 3.5 years after he's retired, he's bankrupt. Wow. So if they're going to spend all their money, my mission is, Well, if I max out your credit card to fill your 8 cavities,
Right.
now you can't go spend it on whatever the hell you're going to buy at IKEA, Walmart, a big screen TV. I mean, they're going to spend all their money.
Right.
So I want to max out their credit card on a better decision, which is healthcare,
Sure.
than big screens, trips to Six Flags over Texas. They're going to have fun,
Right.
even if they blow all their Six Flags of Texas money at the dentist, because they're just going to have a drunken barbecue in their backyard. I mean,
Yeah.
I think healthcare is a sovereign profession. All my role model, I mean, my favorite role model when I was little, it was Mother Teresa of Calcutta,
Yeah.
who just lived with the poor.
Right.
While all the fancy priests lived in the
Right.
Vatican and
The
owned a
Vatican,
helicopter.
right, they got like velvet robes.
Oh yeah, and helicopters.
Right.
You know, and then the other one was Martin Luther, because he was the one who called bullshit on the church and that they were saying all these things were in the Bible. So he converted it to common German so the people could read.
Right.
And find out that everything they're saying up there, that your mom died and she can't get into heaven until you give me 6 silver pieces.
Right.
And he converts into German, says, I can't find where it says that.
Right.
And you and I have always been rebels.
Yeah. Well, you know,
And we're kind of like a Martin Luther, kind of a rebel with a cause.
I was raised Catholic too. I remember.
Is Homoly Italian?
No, it's Hungarian and Polish.
Hungarian and Polish.
Yes.
I had to go to Mass every single day from birth till I left home.
Yeah.
7 days a week. First 10 years always in Latin, and I think it was the best thing in the world that ever happened to me, because for 1 hour you had no idea what the hell that guy was doing. He was like, oh, yeah, oh, yeah. So for 1 hour you couldn't distract yourself. Like, you couldn't go play, you couldn't ride your bike, you couldn't eat breakfast. You had to sit there and actually be alone with your thoughts and think.
Yeah.
And then you start thinking, well, after this I have a spelling test. Huh. What were them 10 words? And just to think of the 10 words would be something.
That's right.
Let alone just to be able to spell it. And I think that 1 hour, I think what it was, when the Mass were in Latin, I wish you'd go back to Latin. Because then you would just tone out the whole thing and just start meditating.
Yeah.
And I think that little lesson of having to just sit there and not be distracted and think and entertain yourself
Yeah.
made you think.
Yeah. You know, getting back to the where rates of fillings and bonding agents and all of that, you know, I am personally glad there's people like that. So much of my success with implant and reconstructive dentistry was based on what egghead grinders were doing in laboratories, understanding titanium alloy, osseointegration, different cements and all that stuff. That's not for me. I get it, but how much do you need of that to be successful with a patient? And the problem is that the pendulum for many dentists swings too far. They swing into this professor mode. They go so far technical that they lose a sense of touch with people. So frankly, I'm glad there's people that will talk about wear facets and wear rates and bonding agents. Do I want to teach it? No. My unique ability is different. What's interesting about that is that, again, I'll use the word seduced. Dentist gets seduced about, wow, you look at that speaker, he's successful, he's got a big house, he's got a national reputation, and he's studying wear facets. Well, if I want to be successful, what should I study? Wear facets. And meanwhile, guys like you and me, we're stuck in some breakout session somewhere, or they put us in front of a general session, and we say things that they've never heard before, but they don't hear it again. Imagine if there was 20 Howard Farrans, or there was 20 Paul Homleys, or 20 Carl Mishes, right? Given a consistent message about building relationships with patients, treating poor people, getting to know people, getting that into the culture. You know how it is. The dental culture, the culture is the accumulated beliefs and behaviors, doesn't support the behavioral skills of influence. It's all patient education. It's all technical. And some dentists make it work. You know, the dentists who can make it work are the ones that learn to connect. How many dentists have got all of the degrees and yet they're still stuck doing $1,800 cases? Nothing wrong with an $1,800 case, don't get me wrong. If that's where you want to be.
There's nothing wrong with an $1,800 case, but there's something wrong when a mama brings in her 5 kids and each one of them has 3 cavities, and they walk out the door and she goes and buys an iPhone.
Right.
And you're sitting there wanting to know what bonding, and they go to all these courses on bonding. You know what my theory is on bonding agents? You know what my theory is?
What is it?
Okay, I've been to Liechtenstein where Ivoclair develops this stuff, and they have like 80 guys in white coats.
Right.
I've been to Minneapolis, St. Paul. I've been to 3 of them more times because my sister, her cloistered Carmelite monasteries in Lake Elmo. So when I go to Minneapolis, St. Paul, I got to spend 4 hours and 1 minute somewhere to make it a business. So I either go to Patterson and go talk to, there was Pete Frechette at the time.
Sure.
Or I'd go to 3M and sit in the organic chem room, and they got like 80 people in white coats, and the leader of the whole time was this little, I mean, she couldn't have been 5 foot and 90 pounds, a little Indian lady. Do you remember her, Samika? And she, and you're in there, and so they would basically, when they come out with a new bonding agent, it'd take like 5 years,
Yeah.
$5 million, 80 guys in white coats. You know when they're done with it? I making their bottle of glue? I bet it's real gluey.
Yeah.
I don't need to go
sticky.
talk to some dentist, say, hey, what do you think of those 80 PhDs? Like, you don't know organic chemistry. You couldn't draw the structures. You're up there saying, well, it's called hema and acetone. You couldn't even draw hematome on a hema or acetone.
Yeah.
You're full of shit. If 3M puts something in a bottle, I bet it freaking works.
Yeah, I think so.
If Ivoclair puts something in a bottle and sells $1 billion a year of this shit, I bet it works. I want to know why Maria and her husband Mario brought in 3 kids. Each one of them had 3 cavities. They all left, never scheduled for anything, and then they went out and bought matching iPhones.
Yeah.
And you said they're too poor.
Right.
You can't sell dentistry. You're focused on the wrong thing. You call it influencing.
Yeah.
And I think you could make every dentist twice as good. You could make every patient twice as lucky if you could convince the dentist to drill, fill, and bill 2 out of 3 of their diagnosed, just cavities, instead of 1 out of 3.
Howard, why don't you help me with that?
Well, let's do it.
You've got a worldwide forum here. I've got a passion for my topic. I'd love to work with you on it. Let's get the word out.
And I also, like your mentor, Carl Mish, I also have a photographic memory. It just has no film in the camera. And so thank you so much for coming on the show, talking
Here we
about
are.
homies.
Yeah.
And homies, you need more influence. Get 2 out of 3.
2 out of 3.
2 out of 3 people. And we're not talking about the $25,000 full arch implant. I'm not even talking. That's the NFL football. I'm talking about little league. What's a little league football when you pull the
the flag football.
I'm talking flag football cavities on kids.
Cavities on kids.
Okay,
And,
thanks so much.
And next time I come back, maybe we talk about, okay, for those dentists who do want to do the big cases, what's the magic there? Or maybe we want to talk about how to be an interesting key opinion leader.
We know we both now live in the same town, the only thing in between us is Dentaltown. We got a magazine, we got a website. You got to meet Tom Giacobbe, the editor.
Good.
You meet Howard Goldstein, the online C. Let's.
And we're going to be at the same meeting tomorrow. We're going to be at the summit meeting, right? So we're going to meet some cool people. I want to introduce you to some people there, and I think they need to be on this show to give their message. Howard,
all right,
you're my friend, my friend.
All right, thank you so
good.
much.
Bye, everybody.